The sky hasn't been blue in years. Now it hangs overhead like a bleeding wound in endless swirl of copper and ash that barely shifts from dawn to dusk. When I first stepped outside after the EMP hit, I thought I'd stepped into a hellish sunset. The haze was that thick, but the sun never changed. It burns low on the horizon, an ember refusing to die, and the air tastes of scorched metal and forgotten memories. Gone are the grassy knolls and shaded parks where children once played. Now the ground is cracked like old paint, each fissure deeper than my fear. I squint across what was once Main Street storefronts, melted into warped glassless shells, neon signs sagging, letter by letter, like broken ribs. The highway that led out of town is buried beneath dunes of ash and sand. Every landmark I knew, every corner where laughter used to echo, has been swallowed by this silent, suffocating wasteland. The rivers have betrayed us. What little water trickles through the old bed of the Green River is thick with sediment and dead algae. You can't drink it. You can't wash with it. You can barely bear to look at it. Upstream, dams cracked and collapsed under the weight of unchecked rainstorms. In their place lie mudflats and wrecked turbines, the skeletal remains of our obsession with control. I remember the engineers' proud faces the day they flipped the switch. Now their monuments are nothing but rust. Wildfires rage in distant hills on either side of town. I hear them like distant thunder on dry afternoons, the crackle and roar. Carried on hot winds, nights bring a bitter chill, and frost forms on my generator's cooling coils. But by midday, the temperature soars past anything that used to be possible. Thermometers shattered weeks ago, but I've felt 120 degrees in the shade. No tree stands here to offer relief, only shattered stumps and charcoal husks. Civilization is a ghost drifting through empty streets. The government collapsed within days of the blackout. No power meant no communications, no heat in the capital's winter, no water pumps in the summer that melted crows from the wires. Now there are only shadow governments, survivor enclaves, holed up in basements or boarded up malls, trading ammo for canned peaches. I've met two factions so far, the scavengers who prowl the ruins like vultures, and the settlers who huddle behind makeshift walls, lights off, praying they go unnoticed. Both groups scream the same name, water. That's all any of us want, but none of us knows where to find it. Institutions died with the lights. Banks became worthless brick shells. Hospitals turned into morgues with empty beds. Schools stand quiet, 1,000 child's drawings fading on bulletin boards. Only the radio station remains, my tiny fortress of static and hope. I feed the old generator by hand crank, until my knuckles bleed. Then I speak into the mic, gathering my voice like precious water, because for some out there, hearing another human means they're not alone. There are rumors, always rumors, of a dam still holding somewhere a river or a hidden spring in the abandoned national park. But those whispers travel on the same wind that carries ash, and more often than not, they lead to broken bodies, half buried in sand. Trust is a dangerous thing now. I carry a rifle more often than I carry a canteen dot at night. I climb to the rooftop of the station and stare at the sky that never changes. The stars are gone choked out by the haze. Once, when satellites still drifted overhead, you could hear the faint hum of their solar arrays. Now there's nothing but silence, and I wonder if they still exist, or if they fell, like everything else, felled by the same pulse that killed our grids. Even in this emptiness, the world isn't entirely dead. There are pockets of stubborn life. A cactus blooming orange blossoms in a cracked sidewalk, mice scurrying beneath collapsed cars, spiders weaving webs in shattered windows. It's a defiant trickle of green in a desert of ruin. Sometimes I catch a whiff of rain on the wind just, a promise of possibility, and I remember that the sky wasn't always this color. I've become a cartographer of desolation, mapping driftwood, rubble, and satellite dishes twisted into rusted flowers. Every day I mark off another landmark that shifted or crumbled. The post office collapse, the gas station fire, the church steeple tumbling into the street. These maps keep me sane. They remind me there was once order here, even if it was fragile. Tomorrow, I'll broadcast again. I'll describe the world as it truly is cracked, rotting, on the brink of finality, because someone, somewhere, might still be listening. And if they are, they need to know they're not alone in the dark. In the end, this world may be unrecognizable, but the echo of human hearts still beats in every shattered window and every smoldering tree. That, at least, remains. I am the voice. In your static if you're still out there listening, then you already know my name, but I suppose it's time to tell you who I am. I'm Miles Harrington, former electrical engineer turned lone broadcaster, and I've been on the airwaves since the EMP pulse tore down every tower, grid, and network on June 14th, 2024. Before the blackout, I designed circuits for a living. Now I hand crank this generator and patch together transmissions with scavenged vacuum tubes. This studio, this ramshackle room of cable splices and batteries has become my sanctuary. It's the only place I can still exercise some control over a world gone mad before everything fell apart. I had a wife, Laura, and a daughter, Clara. Laura was a city planner. She believed in blueprints and long-term strategy. Clara was 7, with a million questions about the stars. In those days, I came home every night to laughter-reel laughter, not the echo of my own voice bouncing off empty streets. Our house smelled of fresh-baked bread and lavender. Now I can't remember the scent of anything except diesel and dust. They didn't survive the first week. The hospitals were overwhelmed. Water treatment plants shut down. The emergency alert never came. I found Laura curled against Clara in our bedroom, both gone before starvation could set in. I packed a single suitcase, grabbed my toolkit and my radio mic, and walked away. I left behind the world I loved, but I carried their memory with me. Survival. Out here is a daily negotiation with death. My generator thrives on the muscle of my arms. Crank 60 seconds on the handle, and I get 4 minutes of juice. I ration that spark carefully 2 minutes for transmission, 2 minutes for charging my headlamp batteries or powering the tiny water purification pump I jury-rigged from an old aquarium filter. I drink rainwater collected on tarps. It's cleaner than the sludge in the riverbed, but it has a faint metallic temps. I cook what little I find over a solar cooker when the sun is high. On cloudy days, I scavenge wood for a smoky fire that nearly chokes me every time. I've learned to read the weather in ash-stained clouds and hot gusts that smell of ozone. I can predict dust storms minutes before they arrive, when the wind shifts and the air tastes of static. I press my back to a concrete wall, cover my mouth with a torn bandana, and wait for the roar. Then I crawl out, scoop up handfuls of sand, and wash it from my clothes by hand in buckets reserved for my personal gear. Every resource is precious. Every drop of sweat is an accounting entry against tomorrow's ration. But I keep going because I have to too honor the promise I made to Laura when we first met. I told her I would protect our family no matter what. And even though I failed her, I can't let their story vanish into oblivion. On the air, between static bursts, I speak their names. I recount our picnic by the river, the way Clara's laugh sounded when she discovered her shadow for the first time. I talk about the pattern of city lights from our apartment window lines, of motion like veins pulsing beneath the night sky. I speak so that someone, somewhere, might realize they're not alone, that they too had a life worth remembering, a future worth fighting for. In the darkness outside, other voices echo mine. Twice a week, I pick up a hand-cranked radio I fixed just for listening. There's Delia, the school teacher, turning an abandoned elementary school into a seed bank. She reports what plants she still has: kale, mustard greens, a handful of tomato seeds. I listen to old Joe, the mechanic, teaching scavengers how to extract metal from ruined cars without burning off the lead. And sometimes, a stranger with a voice like gravel tells of a hidden well 50 miles north-always, 50 miles away. Always unverified, I try not to let my heart leap. Rumors have led me to 5 graves already, but hope, no matter how small, can't be silenced. My rifle is my last line of defense. I learned to shoot when I was 12, hunting rabbits with my father. Now I use it sparingly. Fire, one shot, aim true, or else you give away your position to raiders. I met a group once, 6 men, under the banner of the New Dawn Collective. Though dawn is a concept that died with the sky's true color, they offered protection in exchange for food and water. I refused. Bonds forged in exchange aren't bonds at all their chains, so I walked away, leaving them to patrol the ruins like jackals. I can't trust promises made at gunpoint, nor can I afford the rations for 6 mouths instead of 1. Still, I crave human connection. When I hear that gravelly voice or Delia's calm explanations, I feel my chest tighten like I'm drowning in grief and longing at once. I used to write letters. Now I speak into a mic and trust the wind. Carry them. When the generator sputters and the signal drops, I pray on my knees beside the crank. I pray for endurance, for water, for the strength to turn that handle one more time. I pray for an end to the dust storms, or at least for mercy in the form of a gentle breeze. And sometimes, if I'm honest, I pray to hear my wife's laughter on the next broadcast. I carry Laura's ring in my pocket's simple silver, engraved with our anniversary date. I slide it onto my finger when the nights feel too long. It's a talisman, a reminder that my world once held warmth and certainty. Clara's stuffed rabbit, ragged and absent, its button eye hangs from my backpack strap. I named him Patch, because that's all that remains of her childhood patches of innocence stitched onto a body that's seen too much. In the early days, I thought I could rebuild society through radio. I planned broadcasts on governance, on forming councils, on resurrecting water treatment. But every time I tried to lay out a blueprint for tomorrow, the threat of tomorrow's dust storm or tomorrow's bandit raid cut me off. So I scaled it back. Now, I read poetry lines about finding light in darkness. I share recipes for meager meals. I offer survival tips, how to find dew on cottonwood leaves, how to filter water with charcoal from a fire. I send out heartfelt messages. You matter. You're alive. Speak again soon. They say purpose is the thing that keels you upright when the waves get high. My purpose has morphed from saving my family into saving their memory, saving whoever left from despair. If I can coax someone, anyone, to crank their radio and hear my voice, then for a moment they remember that the world wasn't always this broken and maybe, just maybe, they find the strength to keep going. That's why I broadcast until my arms give out, until the tubes fry, until the world falls entirely silent. I don't know what fate awaits me, whether this generator will seize, whether my rations will run out, whether the next storm will bury this station forever. But I do know that so long as I have breath, I have a duty to speak, to remember, to hold on to hope when all else is lost. Because hope is the only current that can't be electrocuted, the only light a blackout can't extinguish. And so, I'm still here, Miles Harrington, engineer, survivor, voice in the static waiting for you to answer. The crisis began not with a bang, but with a pulsing, invisible wave that ripped through every power line and melted every microchip on the planet. That pulse was the final nail in the coffin of our modern comforts, but it was far from the worst blow we endured. In the weeks and months that followed, the full toll of climate collapse revealed itself, amplified by our loss of technology and infrastructure. What had already been unraveling, global temperature spikes, ocean acidification, relentless droughts, and unseasonal deluges now accelerated unchecked, without the ability to monitor, predict, or mitigate. The weather itself turned against us. I first noticed the shift in mid-July, 6 weeks after the blackout. The nights, which had once offered brittle relief from hot days, no longer cooled below 80 degrees Fahrenheit. By thermometers in discarded weather stations, dug up from forgotten basements, recorded lows of 92 at midnight. We crossed the threshold of survivability, where even sleep became a liability. Our bodies, evolutionarily, tuned for a 37 degrees Celsius core, struggled to maintain homeostasis when the ambient air hovered near that mark. Heat stroke took more lives than starvation that season. By then, the rivers had all but disappeared. What water remained pooled in stagnant, toxic basins where agricultural runoff and industrial pollutants had collected unchecked. The Green River, which once meandered past our town like a ribbon of promise, now sat encased in cracked mud, its channel a dry scar in the earth. Farther upstream, a failed dam, its control systems fried by the EMP collapsed under the weight of an unprecedented flash flood the previous spring. The deluge washed away half a dozen towns, leaving behind nothing but rusted pipes and shattered concrete. Survival grew harder every day because the fundamentals of life, water, food, shelter, and fuel became rarer and more dangerous to secure. Water, scarce and contaminated. Food, reduced to foraged roots, scavenged cans, and the occasional rodent. Shelter, makeshift lean-tos of tarp and plywood scavenged from abandoned construction sites. Fuel, gasoline evaporated in open tanks. Wood burned out faster than it could. Be regrown, blotted out the sun for hours. When the leading edge hit, I was 20 miles east of the station, repairing a wind turbine blade that refused to spin without electronic controls. The roar was deafening, like a freight train of gravel on the move. I pressed into a dry wash, covered my face with layers of cloth, and watched trees snap like matchsticks. That storm stripped the moisture from my skin, filling my lungs with grit. When it passed, the world had lost every shade of green. Leaves lay bleached on the ground, and grasses lay flattened, buried beneath a quarter-inch of silt dot. Every crisis compound made the next one more lethal. With no power to pump groundwater, wells went dry. Hand pumps, long neglected, seized with corrosion. To extract a gallon of water required half an hour of sweltering labor and left me the color of a prune. When I drank it, my tongue split on the mineral grit. I learned to filter it through charcoal and cloth charcoal made by burning brush in a barrel, cloth torn from my own shirts. But that process removed only the worst particulates. Heavy metals and bacteria still slipped through. Each cup felt like Russian roulette with my gut. Food shortages followed. Crops browned and shriveled in the fields as rainfall patterns shifted from seasonal to erratic extremes. Weeks of drought punctuated by hours of torrential rain. When storms did come, they washed away topsoil and flooded the cracked earth with toxic runoff. In the abandoned research greenhouse on the outskirts of town, I once found a patch of lettuce still growing thanks to an old solar panel array that miraculously escaped the EMP. I harvested a handful of leaves, each one tasting faintly of plastic and oxidation, but I treasured them like gold. Fuel was the final straw. Gasoline in open storage tanks evaporated within weeks, and looting stripped most bulk reserves within days of the blackout. Wood, our last fallback, was a limited resource. Cutting live trees only accelerated erosion and desertification, I learned. To build solar cookers from old satellite dishes lined with reflective foil from insulation panels. Little parabolic ovens that could boil water and cook scraps during the brightest hours. But they only work when the sky is clear, and ash-laden clouds now obscure the sun half the year. Scientific mechanics underlie every horror. Mean global surface. Temperature has risen by 1.7 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial times. CO concentrations have climbed above 450 ppm. Glacier melt has accelerated sea level rise, swallowing coastal aquifers that once supplied fresh water. Our engineered systems irrigation networks, desalination plants, power grids were our defense. Once those fell, the raw physics of climate change asserted brutal dominion. Without remote sensing or weather radars, we can't foresee storms until they arrive. Without power, we can't desalinate or treat water. Without electronics, logistics collapse. In desert nights, place clean cloth sheets on corrugated metal or plastic sheeting. As temperatures drop just below the dew point, around 65 degrees Fahrenheit condensation forms. Wring the cloth into a container. A well-placed setup can yield half a liter before sunrise. Heat water to at least 65 degrees Celsius for 10 minutes to kill pathogens. A black-painted metal pot inside a clear glass jar works as a passive heater when exposed to direct sun, burns small branches in a sealed metal drum to produce charcoal, crush and sift through cloth to create layers that remove sediment, always follow with boiling or pasteurization to address microbes. Purslane, lamb's quarters, and dandelion greens persist even in scorched fields. Identify by succulent leaves or toothed margins. Cook briefly to neutralize mild toxins. Reflective. Panels angled at the midday sun can generate enough heat up to 200 degrees Celsius to cook grains or boil water. Constant realignment is required as the sun moves. But even these techniques demand time, labor, and sometimes the very clean water they help produce. An hour spent gathering dew is an hour not spent guarding your camp against looters. An afternoon tending weeds is an afternoon exposed to heat stroke. The human toll is staggering. Malnutrition weakens immune systems. Heat stress causes kidney failure. Contaminated water leads to dysentery outbreaks. In one of Delia's reports broadcast over a separate frequency, she counted more than 30 deaths in her enclave of 50 survivors over a 2-month period. I lost count of how many I've heard of beyond my range. Each name is a warning. The world is emptying faster than our ability to adapt. And yet, despite the desperation, conflict, and decay, I've seen stubborn sparks of adaptability. Raider attacks, once indiscriminate, have given way to fragile negotiations. I heard of a trading post set up in an old service station where survivors barter filter kits for batteries. They've dug a shallow well that yields brackish water, but they mix it with rainwater to dilute the salt. It's not safe for infants, but it keeps adults alive. In the mountains 300 miles north, snowmelt tanks hold enough water to sustain 100 people for a month. They guard it with solar-powered alarms cobbled from scrap electronics. Knowledge has become as valuable as ammunition. I've downloaded burned onto paper hand-drawn maps of underground cisterns made before the floodgates opened 3 decades ago. I've reverse-engineered pump-jack manuals smuggled out of a government archive. On my broadcasts, I lecture on the chemistry of phetylysis to explain how UV radiation now breaks down plastics in our water containers, leaching phthalates. When I speak these facts into the mic, I am both teacher and mourner, lamenting what we've lost and offering the fragments of a new toolkit for survival. The crisis is no longer a distant headline or a future projection. It is the oppressive present. Every sunrise brings a checklist. Crank the generator, broadcast your signal, fix your filters, forage for fuel, defend your perimeter, collect dew, boil water, eat or don't. There is no grand solution on the horizon, only incremental gains carved from the wreckage of our hubris. And yet, for all the science and strategy, the deepest threat remains psychological. Despair is a virus that spreads faster than any dust storm. I hear it in the tremor of a panicked broadcaster pleading for help in the silence of a transmitter that never resumes after a 3-day outage. Hope, that fragile current, is the only thing that can buoy us above the abyss. So each time I describe the mechanics of collapse, how ocean currents are shifting, how monsoon cycles have halved, how wildfires now erupt in places that once never saw flame I do, so not to terrify, but to prepare. Knowledge is a weapon as sharp as any rifle. Survival has become a battle on three fronts: against the elements, against other desperate humans, and against the tendency in our own minds to give into hopelessness. The climate crisis is the fist that knocks us down. The EMP pulse is the headlock that keeps us there. But until the last ember of human will is extinguished, I will keep broadcasting the how and the why, because understanding is the first step to adaptation. And adaptation, no matter how ragged or reluctant, is the only path out of this apocalypse. The air is thick with grit and tension, like invisible barbs scratching at my lungs with every breath. The haze has grown denser. These past weeks each dust storm seems to pull more life out of the world and more resolve from me. I clamp my bandana tighter across my face, then press myself against the reinforced door of the station as the first roar rolls through the empty streets. Windows rattle, the corrugated metal roof hums. I count to 30 before stepping back out, blinking through tunnel vision grit to assess the damage. A panel of solar foil has peeled away. I'll have to hunt for more adhesive or strip another reflector to patch it. There's always something to fix or to fight. I've come to dread the mornings now, because each sunrise brings another tally of losses. My fuel cache, which once held 7 days' worth of rations for the generator, has dwindled to 2. A scavenging run east toward the old hardware store netted me exactly 3 half-empty propane tanks, cursed loot that weighed more on my conscience than in my pack. Propane burns clean, but it's precious. I use it only when the storm is so vicious that I must heat water for my filters. Otherwise, it's crank power all the way. Water continues to betray me. The cistern beneath the station, once brimming with rainwater harvested over months, now sits half empty. I've mapped every drop of moisture I can find within a 10-mile radius, a shallow well behind the collapsed library, dew traps rigged on rusted fire escapes downtown, a tiny seep under the old brewery that tastes of hops and iron. None of it is pure, and each source carries its own price: cramps, fevers, a rattle in my chest that reminds me I might not emerge unscathed. Yesterday, I heard gunshots on the eastern ridge. I froze, mid-crank ear pressed to the generator's handle until the echoes faded. Then I packed my bag and climbed the service ladder to the roof, rifle slung across my back. In the distance, dust kicked up around a cluster of figures' silhouettes, moving with purpose, not the aimless shuffling of scavengers. Raiders. I chose my shot carefully. If I missed, I would only announce my presence. I didn't fire. I watched them from above as they scoured a burned-out gas station. They wore scavenged. Armor bakery oven doors welded into breastplates, bits of tire rubber strapped to forearms. One of them carried a megaphone. I nearly laughed. A megaphone. They bellowed threats through it, though there were no witnesses left to hear. They torch-cut into the remaining fuel tanks. The hiss and spark of flame danced like a cruel celebration in the dusk. When they left, the station's half-dozen drums leaked black oil into the dust and environmental crime I could only stare at in silent fury. Inside the station, the acrid stench of burning fuel and metal lingers in the corners. I wear gloves at all times now and scrub the floorboards with a vinegar solution so old I nearly ran out last week. I wonder if any of the raiders came this way, left their tracks, their spit, their sickness. I haven't yet gotten sick. Somehow, I count that as a victory. Encounters with other survivors are a double-edged sword. 2 nights ago, a woman stumbled into the station, hair wild, eyes sunken, clutching an empty canteen. When I opened the door, she nearly collapsed at my feet. I dragged her inside, laid her on an old canvas cot, and poured water, slowly no, more than spoonfuls between cracked lips. Her name is Mara. She claims to have escaped a small enclave 15 miles north, the haven where they've built wind-powered pumps and glass greenhouses under salvaged skylights. A paradise, she swears, that grows tomatoes and wheat, and where children still laugh. My stomach clenched at the thought of her words. Haven. We invented that word to dream with. I offered her a ration bar and a spot by the generator. She ate. With trembling hands, I asked her a dozen questions. Who's in charge? How many people? What's their defense? But she fell asleep before I got halfway through. In her unconscious state, she murmured the name Sullivan. I don't know who Sullivan is, but Sullivan's haven splays across my mind like a beacon. Still, I don't trust Mara. She says she got past the raiders by paying in seeds blue corn. She calls them traded for safe passage. The thought of trading precious seeds for a rumor nearly made me spit. Seeds are life's currency. Once you give them away, you lose your future harvest. But if her story is genuine, if a community truly exists with functioning greenhouses and drinking water, it could change everything. If I can get there before sleep claimed her last night. Mara told me of a caravan arriving every 2 weeks from the West Delta refugees carrying fish in plastic pouches, fresh water from melting glaciers. She said the refugees followed the rail lines, piecing together tracks to tow portable filters on flatbed carts. Their leader, a man called Reyes, negotiates safe passage through raider territory by offering mechanical repairs. He's an engineer in another. Of us, I forced my eyes open when she spoke his name. I nearly knocked the cot over in my haste to hear more. But Mara drifted off, talking in her sleep about children's laughter in the dawn light. And I realized that hope could be a weapon as sharp as a blade and just as dangerous if mishandled. While Mara slept, I crept outside and surveyed the scars on the world. A new dust storm churned in the distancy low, rolling cloud that swallowed the horizon. It smelled of iron and death, and I knew that by morning, any tracks Mara and I had left would be erased. My leg itched from the bite of some blood-sucking insect I couldn't identify. I licked salt off my palm and pressed it into the wound. Every healing agent I possess has gone to the refugees or to Mara. I'm lean now, every resource allocated, in hopes of forging an alliance, of following a rumor into reality. Trust is the undercurrent that threatens to drown me. I've seen hopeful travelers lead entire settlements into ambushes. I've heard of false messiahs promising salvation at the price of loyalty and obedience. I've learned that desperation makes liars of us all. And yet, what choice do I have? Left alone, I'm a flicker in the static, a single voice fighting, a cacophony of howling storms. Together with Mara, with Reyes, with Sullivan's Haven, I might be part of something larger than survival. Or I might be walking into another DEATRAP. As I pack my bag for the journey north, I feel the familiar ache in my arms, the burn from cranking the generator until my knuckles crack. Bars are down to 6. My water cache will last 2 days. I stash extra charcoal filters and seal them in an oilskin pouch. I graft a length of copper wire to my pack so I can repair any broken antennae along the way. I slip the silver ring from my pocket and cradle it in my palm. It weighs heavier than my rifle. The dawn that follows is a gut punch of heat and dust. I step into the swirling haze, rifle slung, pack heavy on my shoulders. Mara wakes as I'm closing the door behind me. She reaches out, eyes widening. I bend and guide her hand to the packs. Strap, we move, I tell her. First light, keep quiet, and follow my steps. We skirt the burning skeleton of the gas station, move past charred engine blocks, and head up the ridge. The world is a vista of ruin-rusted water towers tilting, collapsed railway trestles half buried in sand, a railroad car filled with bleached bones. I lead her along the old service road, listening through my bandana for the faint click of rifles behind us. Every crunch of gravel underfoot is a potential betrayal. A sudden roar splits the air. Engines. Mara gasps. I drop to a crouch and press her down behind an overturned shipping container. Through the dust, I see headlights for vehicles, and farm buggies patched with sheet metal. The raiders, again, their emblems spray-painted on hoods. A skull made of wrenches. They barrel down the road, miss us by inches, and keep going south. I exhale the breath I didn't realize I was holding. We wait until their dust cloud dissolves into the haze. Then we move again faster, more urgently. 4 hours later, we crest a low hill and see the ruins of the elementary school Mara mentioned. A chain-link fence surrounds it, topped with barbed wire. Through broken windows, I glimpse green leaves shimmering behind plastic sheeting. A windmill, patched with junked bicycle spokes, creaks in the breeze. My heart pounds not from the climb, but from the sight of life in this dead world. Mara steps forward, tears streaking ash across her cheeks. They're real, she whispers. They're really real. I should feel relief. Instead, my chest tightens with doubt. What if this is a trap? What if Sullivan isn't a leader, but a warlord? What if I've led Mara and myself into slaughter? I glance at her, gaunt, sunburnt, trembling with hope. I see Laura's eyes in hers, and I realize that sometimes you have to risk everything for a chance at something better, even if it means opening your door to strangers, even if it means that the journey might be your last. I raise my hand, signaling Mara to stay low, and step toward the gate rifle at the ready, voice calm but firm. Sullivan, I call out. This is Miles Harrington. I come in peace, seeking sanctuary. The gates swing open. A figure emerges, arms raised, no weapon in sight. His face is weathered but kind, and behind him, rows of seedlings sway like a promise. For a moment, I forget the storms, the raiders, the thirst. For a moment, I believe that maybe hope has a home. The wall of clouds rose on the horizon like a living thing, an impossible mountain of ochre and black that churned with thunderous intent. I felt it before I saw it, a low rumble in my bones, a static charge in the air that made every hair on my arms and neck stand on end. Mara, walking beside me along the dirt road to Sullivan's Haven, paused and looked up, her eyes widening with a mixture of awe and dread. "It's coming," she whispered, voice cracking. I should have warned her. I should have known that finding this place wouldn't mean safety, but merely the prelude to a far greater trial. For 3 days, we'd made our way north, guided by faded maps and Mara's trembling memory. Twice we'd skirted raider patrols. Twice we'd scavenged emergency rations and repaired broken antennae with copper wire from abandoned power poles. And now, at the edge of salvation, the world itself threatened to swallow us whole behind us. Rows of greenhouses glinted in the dusty light, their plastic skins tight and clear. Beyond them, the windmill spun lazily on its patched wooden blades, pumping water from a deep cistern one that Sullivan told the others had once fed an entire Midwestern town. The sight of running water still brings tears to my eyes, but this sight made my heart slam against my ribs like a warning drum. We'd come to Sullivan's Haven seeking refuge, but when we arrived this morning, he greeted us not with open arms, but with a grave face. "A storm is brewing," he said, eyes fixed on the sky. One unlike any we've seen in years. We'd spent the afternoon reinforcing greenhouse walls and chaining water barrels to concrete blocks. I taught the settlers how to rig charcoal filters quickly. Mara distributed rations to the children peering through broken window panes. Every moment was a race against the gathering clouds. Now, as the storm swallowed the horizon, I reached into my pack and fingered Laura's silver ring. I cursed the fates that had let me come this far only to face a force of nature that didn't care for alliances or promises. I tried to summon the engineer's mind that once solved circuit problems for a living, but there was no circuit 2. Reroute, no power grid to reboot. Here, in the face of nature's fury, human ingenuity felt as fragile as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. The first gust hit like a freight train. I hunched low, bracing myself against Mara and the chain link fence that separated the road from the crops. Soil and grit whipped around us, stinging every exposed inch of skin. The greenhouse roofs hissed under the wind's assault, windows rattling like bones in a drum. Children inside shrieked and clutched one another, while adults ran to secure. Tarps and battened-down doors. Sullivan's voice crackled through the megaphone he'd scavenged long ago. "Get indoors. Now." I grabbed Mara's arm. "Move," I barked, half dragging, half supporting her toward the nearest greenhouse. We ducked under the doorframe and slammed the latch just as another gust ripped a section of plastic away. On the far side, inside it was dim, green-scented, and claustrophobic rows of seedlings shivered in the half-light. Rain followed the dust, a pulsing wall of acidic droplets that hissed against plastic and steel. The wind tunneled through the facility's corridors, shaking supports and sending buckets of collected water crashing to the floor. My chest tightened as I listened, the windmill creaking, the cistern's pipes groaning, the whisper of water rushing through valves that might rupture at any moment. I spotted the main pump room at the center of the compound, an old barn retrofitted, with piping and a battered diesel generator. Sullivan and 2 others were there, working feverishly to switch from solar to generator power. The generator coughed and stalled under the load, then sparked back to life with a shuddering roar. If it died now, the pumps would stop, and the cistern would overflow or collapse. I made for the door. Mara grabbed my hand. "Don't go." I looked at her, at the fear in her eyes, and felt the weight of every loss I'd endured. Laura's silence, Clara's empty bed, the world shattered by a pulse and 1,000 broken promises. My duty had always been to broadcast, to remember. Now it was to act, to fight for this fragile miracle of green in a desert of ruin. "I have to," I said. "Help Sullivan keep those pumps running." I plunged back into the maelstrom. The rain was needles, the wind an invisible fist. I stumbled, toward the barn, each step a negotiation with gravity and the storm's chaotic force. I ripped my bandana loose, wrapped it tighter around my mouth, and tore a strip of cloth from my shirt to cover my eyes. Inside the barn, Sullivan's hair was plastered to his forehead, sweat and rain mixing in the flickering light. The generator groaned, then shuddered and died. A collective gasp echoed behind me. Sullivan slammed his fist on the console. Damn it, not now. Without power, the pumps would stall, and the cistern would backflow, flooding the entire lower compound and destroying every crop we'd worked so hard to raise. I crossed to the control panel and yanked open the wiring hatch. Wires hissed like snakes in the dim light. I recognized the burn marks overheating, likely from moisture intrusion. I grabbed a length of copper wire from my pack and jury-rigged a bypass around the fried relay. Sparks flew and I recoiled, but the generator roared back to life. Water surged through the pipes, the pumps hummed, and I felt a grim satisfaction at having given life back to this place. If only for the moment. Then came a new sound, low, metallic groan from overhead. The greenhouse's main support beam, weakened by rot and lashed by wind, was buckling. I looked up and saw it bending toward a row of tomato vines that had taken months to grow. If that beam fell, it would crush the pump room beneath, sever every pipe, and drown the cistern in debris. Move back, I shouted to the workers around me. I climbed onto a crate and grabbed a length of salvaged steel conduit. Rain streamed down my face as I wedged it beneath the beam's weakest point, levering with every ounce of strength left in my arms. The beam creaked and cracked, but it held. My hands stung with splinters, and my shirt was sodden. But I stayed until the wind shifted and the beam straightened. I collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. My muscles trembled from exertion, from fear, from the fierce drive to protect someone beyond myself. Mara burst in moments later, eyes wide, rain cascading from her hair. "You did it," she gasped, sliding to the floor beside me. I pressed a hand to her cheek, feeling warmth beneath the grime. We did it. We cleaned up as best we could, while the storm raged outside. Sullivan barked, orders checked the cistern, reinforce the greenhouse, tend to the children. Every settler moved with purpose, a symphony of survival under the dirge of the storm. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the wind shifted. The rain eased to a steady patter, the dust, drawn into the cloud, lifted enough to let through a pale shaft of light. I staggered to the door and peered out. The world glistened, slick and raw. Small rivulets cut through the dirt, carrying away ash and grit. The greenhouse plastic fluttered, intact. The windmill's blades turned, slower now. But turning, I let the moment wash over me. The whoosh of water, the sigh of shifting, leaves, the murmured prayers of survivors gathering around buckets of rain. They brought me a tin cup filled with fresh water, clear, cold, life-giving. I drank deeply, feeling the burn in my throat and the promise in my bones. Mara came beside me, her eyes reflecting the lamplight. "You risked everything," she said. Softly, I turned to her, the woman who carried hope in her trembling frame. "For a chance at something more," I replied. Inside the barn, Sullivan approached with a clipboard and a grim smile. "Miles Harrington," he said, extending a hand. "I can't think of anyone better to lead our communications and crisis teams. This idea of a new world needs someone who knows how to keep the lights on, both literally and figuratively." I glanced around at the settlers. children clutching seed packets, mechanics patching walls with tarps, cooks boiling water over portable solar cookers. In their faces, I saw the echo of Laura's hope and Clara's wonder. I took Sullivan's hand. "I'll do it," I said, as the storm clouds rolled past and the first real rain in years washed the earth. I realized that the turning point wasn't in finding water or shelter, it was in choosing to stand and fight for something larger than my own survival. In that moment, I became more than a voice in the static. I became a promise that even in a world torn apart by pulse and dust, humanity's resilience could spark a new dawn. And as I looked to Mara, to Sullivan, and to every soul who dared to dream behind these plastic walls, I understood that the fight for tomorrow had truly begun. The dawn arrived on quiet feet. The wind had died to a whisper, and the rain that followed the storm left the world baptized in liquid light. I stepped out of the barn just as the first rays pierced the lingering gray, painting the plastic skins of greenhouses in soft gold. For a moment, I thought the world might hold its breath and then exhaled. The aftermath of the storm was written in every puddle and mud track. Outside the compound, the dirt road had softened into a river of clay. Tire treads and boot prints crisscrossed the wet mirror, as if the promise of water had drawn every soul in the valley to this one place. I walked its length, boots sinking ankle deep, and counted signs of survival, footprints leading into the fields, backs bent over seedlings, the glint of hand tools left leaning against work tables, children's laughter carried on the breeze. As they splashed in shallow pools, the damaged greenhouse we'd saved stood intact, though its ventilation shutters sagged under the weight of soaked tarps. Sullivan's crew was already at work, propping up beams, stapling fresh sheets of plastic in place, and rigging new lines to channel rainwater off the roofs and into barrels. Mara knelt beside a cluster of tomato plants, gently brushing mud. From their leaves, a curve I hadn't dared imagine seeing again. Inside the barn, the pump room hummed with steady purpose. The diesel generator, that stubborn heart we'd resurrected, drumbled beneath its metal hood, sending clear water up through copper pipes into the cistern. I opened the valve and watched it trickle out into waiting buckets, each drop a victory. A group of mechanics scrubbed filters, reassembled valves, and calibrated pressure gauges. Their hands, once trembling with despair, now moved with the confidence of men and women who understood the machinery of survival. I let the scene wash over me, the cadence of hammer on nail, the drip of water into pails, the soft exchange of clipped voices. For the first time since the EMP pulse, the world felt like it might heal. Not return to what it once was, but find a new shape, defined by small miracles and shared labor. I climbed the steps to the radio loft with a fresh mug of water in hand. The generator that powered the transmitter roared in greeting, its vibrations humming through the floorboards. I wiped the condensation from the mug and lifted it in a silent toast. To new beginnings, I whispered, though the only answer was the clicking of tubes warming up, and the low buzz of the microphone broadcasting again felt different now. I spoke not just as a lone engineer cranking hope out of static, but as the communications director for Sullivan's Haven tasked with connecting us to other pockets of survivors, coordinating supply caravans, and forging alliances that might endure longer than any single storm. I read reports of emergent communities, a fishing cope on the banks of the Mississippi, now salting and smoking their catch. A geothermal workshop in Montana, repurposing hot springs into heat for winter. A chain of trading posts along the old railroad, each linked by messenger pigeons and encrypted hand-drawn maps. My words carried across the airwaves like seeds on the wind, landing in radios half buried in basements, draped in tarps in desert camps, clipped inside the armor of isolated patrols. I offered practical advice: how to repair windmill bearings with bicycle chains, how to ferment root vegetables for longer storage, how to flag a signal fire that wouldn't spark a wildfire. Between tips, I told our story of people who had dug a cistern with bare hands, who had stitched torn plastic into greenhouses, who had risked everything to stand together in the rain after the broadcast. I sat alone for a moment, tracing the grooves of the microphone with a fingertip. I thought of Laura and Claranne for the first time. I felt that maybe I could let their memories rest more lightly on my heart. Their loss would always be with me, but it would no longer be the only story I carried. Chapter by chapter, our little world was writing itself anew. The settlers organized nightly councils, engineers, gardeners, waterkeepers, security teams. Mara emerged as the head of the children's collective, teaching them scavenged nursery rhymes and coordinating seed planting lessons. Sullivan remained the unwavering figure of leadership, his gray hair now streaked with mud and rain, his voice still calm when issuing orders. I joined the security drills, mock raids to train young recruits in vigilance without breeding paranoia. I led workshops on radio etiquette and low-power transmission techniques. I taught a handful of eager minds how to rebuild preamp circuitry with vacuum tubes and galvanic cells. Each small success felt like a defiance of the blackout that tried to kill us. Outside the fences, nature began to remind the world that healing moves at its own pace. The dust that had choked our lungs settled into mud puddles that reflected. The sky earthworms wriggled in the new soil, aerating it. Tiny shoots mustard greens, purslane, clover sprouted in footprints once imprinted in dust. A handful of birds returned, distant specks wheeling overhead before diving to bathe in a drained irrigation ditch. Their songs were broken, uncertain, but unmistakably alive. But progress was neither linear nor guaranteed. 1 week later, the sun blazed down, evaporating puddles faster than they could form. Temperatures soared, and the settlers scrambled to protect seedlings under makeshift shade cloths. The generator sputtered when I miscalculated fuel reserves, leaving us without filtered water for an anxious hour. Raiders struck at a distant outpost, cutting supply lines and scattering refugees who fled toward us in the night, chattering with terror and exhaustion. In those moments, I felt the pull of old fears, of isolation, of failure, of letting down the people who now depended on me. I remembered the sting of guilt the day I found Laura and Clara, and I refused to let that guilt dim my resolve again. So I stood in front of the Joint Council, voice steady, and laid out contingency plans, well-drill teams, armed escorts, ration sharing, protocols. And afterward, some are strong at the broken places. I paused, feeling the weight of every face turned toward me, faces that knew what brokenness looked like, and now sought strength in those cracks. When I finished, Mara squeezed my hand. The council nodded, and I felt something settle in my chest. Fierce, unsentimental pride. This community was battered, but it was no longer broken. It was alive. Weeks turned into months. The greenhouses became nurseries for dozens of crops: beans, squash, barley. A communal compost pit thrummed with microorganisms feasting on kitchen scraps. The rainwater cistern filled and overflowed into irrigation channels defined by gutters and hoses. Mara's children recited alphabet songs beside row markers. Sullivan negotiated treaties with neighboring enclaves by radio, swapping surplus potatoes for medical supplies. I watched it all from the radio loft, glass windows streaked with condensation and mud. I thought of the world outside our valley of drought-trodden plains, of cities silenced and consumed by dust. But I also thought of these greenhouses, these people, this fragile fractal of new civilization. I reached into my pocket and touched Laura's ring. It felt warm against my palm, warmed by proximity to life rather than the cold of loss. One evening, as the sun sank behind ragged clouds, I climbed to the roof to listen to the night. The cicadas once thought extinct in this region had returned, buzzing in the fields beyond the fence. I sat on the corrugated metal boots, damp, and let their song wash over me. The sky, once perpetually copper, had softened to a bruised purple. Stars peeked through for the first time in memory-faint pinpricks, but unmistakable in that quiet. I understood that falling action doesn't mean the end of struggle. It means the beginning of something new. The crisis had forced me into choices I never imagined, to confront nature's wrath, to trust a stranger named Mara, to stand in solidarity with a community called Sullivan's Haven. Those crucibles tempered me, reshaped me. The voice in the static was no longer alone. It was part of a chorus. I rose before dawn to crank the generator routine now, but still prayerful. I switched on the transmitter and spoke into the mic. This is Miles Harrington, broadcasting. From Sullivan's Haven to all survivors within range, water flows here, seeds grow here, and hope endures here. You are not alone. We are rebuilding, one day at a time. If you can hear me, answer on your frequency. We will share what we have, and together we will forge a future. I let the words hang in the air, carried beyond fences, beyond fields, into the dark. And in that echo, I heard answers coming back, crackles of static, voices tentative at first, then clear names, locations, messages of cautious optimism. The dust had cleared, but the earth beneath our feet was still shifting. We had found a foothold, a fleeting spark in a burnt-out world. The road ahead would wind through storms and betrayals and setbacks. This spark could light the way. The fallout of collapse would linger in scars on the land and in memories etched in bone. But our story, our new story, was writing itself in wet soil and threaded wires. I folded my map, tucked it into my jacket, and stepped into the morning light, ready for whatever came next. I stand in the soft glow of lantern light, listening to the hum of the generator and the distant drip of water into the cistern. The rain has ceased for now, leaving slick puddles in every rut and groove. In the hush that follows, I feel the weight of a promise fulfilled on, the looming burden of the promises still to be kept. Mara called me over. Before dawn, her face lit by the crimson of unripe fruit, and handed me a single green tomato, still firm to the touch. "Try it," she said, "before it ripens." Me of summers long gone. It was sour, yes, and a bit unripe. but it was ours. Yet for every small victory, there lingers the memory of every loss. I think of Laura's gentle laugh, the curl of Clara's hair, the quiet certainty of home. Those ghosts follow me through every hallway of the compound and every broadcast into the static. I carry them as both anchor and sail. They keep me grounded in why I fight, and they push me forward toward what I might yet build. Hope is fragile. Yesterday, a supply caravan bound for Sullivan's Haven was ambushed on the old Highway 6 men killed. To taken prisoner, the rest fled back to their enclave. Now that hope has been diverted, and I must find a way to replace it, or the wounds of the weak will fester. Mara and I pored over maps that night by lantern light, plotting alternative routes through the foothills, willing ourselves toward solutions. I sensed her fear, but also watched that spark in her eyes, the same spark I once saw in Laura's. Every day brings a new obstacle. The cistern's walls are leaking. We must patch them before next week's rains. The greenhouse hinges are corroding, and the next windstorm could tear them loose. Fuel remains scarce. Even recycled cooking oil only powers the generator for a few minutes at a time. I ration my broadcasts now, 2 per day, each carefully scripted to share vital intelligence, coordinate defense patrols, or teach a new survival technique. Each watt of power is a precious gift, and yet, despite the fragility, there is momentum. The children, once shy and listless now, run through the trenches we dug for irrigation, their laughter echoing like prayers. They know that when the water comes, it will flow through channels they helped carve. They know that seeds planted by their small hands might feed someone else in need. Their joy is stubborn, a proof that life persists. Out beyond the fence, the fields are showing signs of recovery. The mustard greens I harvested yesterday have sprouted a second flush of leaves. Purslane has spontaneously returned around the compost pits, a botanical immigrant that thrives on disturbance. Earthworms have reappeared in the wet soil silently, working to aerate and enrich the ground. These small ecosystems unfurl at their own pace, not ours. But they remind us that nature's healing cannot be forced. I find myself more patient these days. I used to crave immediate results. A repaired circuit, a successful broadcast, a clear answer. When I look at the compound lit by lanterns at night, I see a constellation of human effort, a patchwork of hope stitched with wire and sweat. My reflections often turn inward. Who am I now, if not the lone voice in the static? I am the engineer. Who rebuilt a generator from scrap? I am the radio operator who bridges enclaves, horizon. But I also feel a quiet confidence. I'm no longer surviving alone. I'm part of something that endures. World is still a memory, but climate extremes, resource scarcity, and the threat of human violence remain ever present. If anything, I've learned that disasters come in waves. You batten down one storm, only to find another gathering on the horizon. That is the nature of our new world. It demands unceasing vigilance. Complacency is a fatal luxury. Each morning, I rise before dawn to check water levels, inspect filters, test radio frequencies. I cannot relinquish, for to do so would be to invite collapse. And yet, for all the toil and worry, there are moments when I pause and simply breathe. I watch the sunrise paint the greenhouse's gold. In its imperfection, I hear the measured breathing of settlers sleeping in their bunks, safe for the night. I feel the steady hum of the generator, honoring each rotation of its shaft as another turn in our collective story. My final message, then, is a plea and a promise to anyone still listening on the move, in a half-buried bunker or a deserted rooftop. You are not forgotten. If you can hear this, take heart. Gather what knowledge you have: maps, gear, seed packet sand. Make your way north. Look for the windmill's slow spin on the ridge. Follow the channel of clear water and the laughter of children. We will make space for you at the table. We will share our harvest, our tools, our hope. To those who feel their will faltering, who hear each ragged breath as a burden, remember that hope is neither a shot of adrenaline nor a borrowed word. It is a quiet flame kindled by each act of repairing a pump, teaching a child, sharing a ration bar. Feed that flame daily, and let its warmth remind you why you endure. And to myself, I say, hold fast to the knowledge that tomorrow is neither gift nor guarantee. It is a challenge. We meet it not as isolated survivors, but as a community bound by shared struggle and mutual aid. Be snuffed out. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I only know this: the world will be in flux, shaped by forces both brutal and benevolent. But for today, we are here. We have water, we have food, we have shelter, and we have each other. Total despair. Stay alive. Stay human. The blackout may have stolen our power, but it cannot darken our resolve. Humming, ready to guide you through the night. And if you can, answer back. Let us build a dawn from the ruins, one heartfelt heartbeat at a time.